In the heart of a bustling metropolis, where the scent of sin lingered in the air, Daniel Reed stared blankly out the window, his gaze unfocused as the sounds of the city below crawled through the thin panes of glass, muffled by the night. The lights outside Daniel's office cast harsh shadows across the room, distorting the thin haze of smoke drifting from his cigarette. Another night gone by in this city of shadows and secrets, where despite the victories, the darkness always seemed to linger, like a stain that won't come out.
Here I am, a man forged in the fires of adversity, hardened by years of seeing the worst that humanity and the inhuman has to offer. And yet, despite it all, there's a part of me that can't help but wonder if things could have been different. If I had taken a different path, made different choices, would I still be sitting here, drowning my sorrows in smoke and regret?
He took another drag. Nothing. It was hollow and empty, only a futile attempt to feel alive. He hated being a vampire, a living dead. Most of them were monsters and proud of it. But he had met some that were trying their best to do what is right. He missed his time with the Midnight Fiends. The short while they spent together was the highlight of his existence as a Nosferatu. A knock broke his trance, a sharp rap that echoed through the silence of the room.
It's open.
The door creaked open, and she stepped in. Yelena. The first thing he noticed was her scent, something exotic, dangerous. She moved with a sway in her step, each stride deliberate. Her eyes met his with a glint of amusement, as if she knew more about him than he wanted her to. She lingered by the doorway, her red lips curving into a smirk.
What brings you to my office?
Business.
She replied with a hint of a laugh, her gaze not leaving his. She moved closer until she was standing near his desk. He noted the way she looked at him, like a predator sizing up prey.
You're not from around here, are you?
She asked, her voice smooth, almost mocking. He leaned back, folding his arms.
Is it that obvious?
Just a bit.
She ran a finger over the back of the chair in front of his desk, letting it hover before pulling it out and sitting down with elegance, crossing one leg over the other.
It always seems to me like you're mixed up in something big.
His tone sharpened. She raised an eyebrow, a smile flickering at the edge of her mouth.
What makes you say that?
Call it a hunch, call it intuition. Either way, I've got a feeling you're trouble.
She chuckled softly, the sound almost mocking.
You've got me all wrong, detective. I'm just a woman trying to make her way in the world.
Somehow I doubt that.
She leaned in, her gaze intense.
Tell me, detective, do you always trust your instincts?
Only when they tell me to stay away from dames like you.
Shame. You might be missing out on all the fun.
She smirked. He considered her words, but there was something else, a glint of curiosity he couldn't entirely hide. Something in her look told him she saw it too. Her eyes softened, but her expression held a trace of intensity.
So, I've heard you're not exactly in the best of company these days.
She tilted her head, watching his reaction.
You do know that Pierre Dupont has a certain influence over you.
Daniel looked away, suddenly unwilling to meet her gaze.
I know. Enough.
He said, his voice barely above a murmur. She nodded, a knowing look crossing her face.
I can see it in you. The doubt, the way you will wavers whenever he's near. Do you understand what's happening?
Daniel hesitated, a shadow crossing his face.
Not entirely.
Then, I wish to tell you a story. It might help you to understand why you feel the way you do.
Daniel frowned, but he couldn't resist the pull in her voice. She wasn't here just to talk. She carried a truth that tugged at something inside him. In her gaze, he saw something he'd missed for so long.
All right,
he said finally, his tone resigned but curious.
Tell me your story.
The dim light in Daniel's office appeared to grow softer as Yelena's voice filled the space, her words weaving a world far removed from the grime and steel of the city. She began slowly, as if drawing back layers of dust from an ancient relic, her gaze distant as she painted the image of a river under starlit skies, where civilizations rose and fell beneath the quiet witness of the Euphrates.
Before she was a legend, Ishtar was a priestess, whose beauty could freeze men's hearts or set them ablaze. Her voice held the magic even mages feared. In her youth, she was blessed by mortals and envied by the divine. She did not ask for gifts, but they were given to her by those desperate to be in her favor to earn her smile.
Yelena paused, as if seeing the priestess in her mind's eye.
There is an old myth about her. One night, she walked to the edge of the sacred grove, where an ancient tree bore a single fruit unlike any other. She plucked it and took a bite. It is said that in tasting that fruit, she stole a fragment of the knowledge held by the gods themselves. It was this act that first drew the gaze of the immortals. For a while Ishtar possessed beauty. It was her hunger for something beyond human limitations that set her apart.
Daniel could almost feel the sand of that distant land shifting beneath his feet. Yelena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, laced with awe and caution.
One night, Tiamat herself, the first Nosferatu, came to Ishtar. The queen of monsters saw in her kindred spirit. Tiamat offered her something no mortal would refuse. A taste of true immortality, a beauty that would never fade, power that would defy the limits of the flesh. But there was a price. In exchange for eternal life, Ishtar would become Tiamat's vassal, her loyal acolyte in the war against those who ruled over the land. The mages posing as gods. Ishtar was no fool, and didn't refuse. Tiamat directed her to seek out a creature of great power, a Nephilim known as the Eagle. To consume this being would be her final rite of transformation. It is said she ventured in the Darklands to find it, a journey that took her to the edge of death and beyond. What passed between them is shrouded in myth. But when she returned, she was no longer human.
Daniel listened in silence, captivated, as Yelena described Ishtar's return to her city, transformed into a creature of the night.
Her once potent beauty was now an unholy radiance, amplified beyond mortal comprehension. Her voice, which had always been enchanting, became irresistible, capable of bending even the strongest will. And her power did not stop there. She quickly discovered something new, a dark practice we call the sanguine fealty. Through her blood, Ishtar could bind others to her will. It wasn't just words or charm. It was deeper. She drank from her followers, and in return, she gave them her own blood, binding them to her in a way no human could resist. The mortals worshipped her, calling her goddess. Her influence seeped into every corner of the land, commanding loyalty that transcended reason.
Daniel's gaze narrowed as he began to understand the nature of this power.
Sanguine fealty. Vampires using it to influence others is not so rare, is it?
He asked, more to himself than to Yelena. She nodded.
To control through blood, Ishtar perfected it. She built an empire, commanding legions of followers who worshipped her with undying devotion. When Tiamat finally rallied the Nosferatu to destroy the mages, Ishtar was at her side. In battle, she was as fierce as she was graceful, leading her forces against those who dared defy the will of the Nosferatu. What followed was their golden age. The Nosferatu ruled over the night, and their word was law. They were the gods and goddesses after the mages fell, creating an age of dark beauty and fear. But like all ages, it couldn't last forever. The tower they built, their seat of power, crumbled. And just like that, Ishtar, along with the other founders, disappeared after the Tower of Babel.
Daniel sat back, absorbing it all. Her words filled him with a strange mix of awe and dread. To imagine a world shaped by creatures like Ishtar, bound by power and blood, was unsettling in ways he hadn't anticipated.
Ishtar's legacy did not end with her disappearance. She left behind 4 children, each possessing a fragment of her power. They were known by titles more than names, and their gifts shaped our house as it is today. The demagogue, whose voice could sway nations. His words alone could bend people's minds, stoking their emotions and driving them to action. The muse, who wielded a beauty that was almost painful. She could mesmerize with a glance, ensnaring mortals and vampires alike. The architect, a visionary who could shape stone and build the foundations to empires with his hands. He was the mind behind the Tower of Babel. And the enchantress, who delved into magic. She crafted spells, illusions, and words that could baffle even the most skilled Nosferatu. Here in Dreadfort, we are descended from the muse.
Daniel glanced down, a faint smirk touching his lips.
I guess I can see some resemblance in you.
Yelena chuckled, brushing a stray strand of hair back.
Flattery will get you nowhere, detective. But yes, I suppose we all carry a piece of her, in one way or another.
Daniel's eyes narrowed.
So the seductive power, the mind games, it all comes from these 4?
Yelena nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on him.
Ishtar created them to carry on her will. Together, they laid the foundation of what we are. But their lives were probably just as tragic and dark as any vampire's fate.
And you, Yelena, where do you fit into all this? Why are you here telling me this story?
Yelena's eyes softened as she met his gaze.
Because, Daniel, I thought it was time you knew where you came from. The long story of the blood that runs in your veins. And well...
She hesitated, a vulnerability flashing across her face.
I thought you should know that you are not alone in this.
I always thought I was just another lost soul trying to get by in the dark.
We are all lost souls, Daniel. That's why we find each other. My crew, the Ebony Dagger, was formed for that very reason. To find others, to share the eternal night.
Guess it's good to have company in the darkness.
Daniel once again remembered the Midnight Fiends and Pamela. Yelena continued the tale. She recounted the ancient days when House Ishtar was at the peak of its power in Rome. He could practically see the grand feasts, the shadowy chambers lit by flickering torches, and the sensual decadence of the Roman Empire. And at the center of it all was the enigmatic leader of House Ishtar, known now only as Strix, a figure as alluring as she was ruthless.
She was unlike anyone Rome had ever seen. A witch, a mystic, an empress in her own right. It was said that her influence drove Rome's emperors mad. But it wasn't just her beauty, Daniel. She possessed something far darker. A cunning and power that could turn men to her will.
And she used that power, didn't she? Twisting people, bending them all for her own gain?
Daniel asked. Yelena nodded.
Exactly. Through a blend of seduction, blood magic and manipulation, she became Rome's shadow ruler. She commanded a web of influence stretching across the city, controlling senators, generals, and even the emperors themselves. It was said her sway over Claudius was so complete that she practically ran his court.
Sounds almost like she was Rome's true ruler,
Daniel observed.
She was, in every way that mattered. Rome became her playground, and she fattened it greedily, indulging in all it offered. And she used the power of her blood fealty to bind her most powerful followers to her, creating a loyalty so profound that they would die or kill for her without hesitation.
But how did it all fall apart? With that kind of power, how did she lose everything?
Yelena's gaze darkened.
Rome was as unforgiving as it was indulgent. The moment Strix's ambition became too obvious, her enemies gathered in the shadows. The emperors she manipulated, The nobles she twisted to her will, they grew resentful. Eventually, Strix was overthrown in a bloody coup. She was destroyed, her power shattered. House Ishtar transformed into House Strix, a name chosen to honor her and to embody the seductive, dark power that defined her rule. Our house embraced that legacy ever since. House Strix has always seen the Roman era as its apex, our golden age.
Daniel leaned back, a wry smile on his face.
So, let me get this straight. Your house, our house, reveres a seductress turned witch empress who manipulated emperors, created blood slaves, and met a dramatic downfall?
Yelena nodded, watching him with a faint smile.
That's precisely it. Strix was the embodiment of the house's ideals, for better or worse. And that's why we remember her not only as the figure of power, but as a warning. Power and desire can consume just as easily as they can elevate. House Strix has carried her memory forward because she represents something deep within us, a reminder of what we can achieve and what we risk losing.
Daniel tapped a finger against his chin, considering.
It's unsettling, knowing that vampires today still use that same power to manipulate and control. Modern vampires may not be as grand as ancient Roman empresses, but they play the same games.
Yelena's eyes glinted, pleased by his keen observation.
Yes, and that's the crux of House Strix's power. We do not wield brute strengths. We wield something subtler, the ability to control, to influence, to enthrall. It's a form of art.
As they settled back in the shadowed silence of the room, Yelena's expression turned contemplative, and her gaze grew distant.
There is one more figure I think you should know about. A figure who left a controversial legacy. He may have been more monster than vampire, but he undeniably shaped House Strix.
Daniel tensed, sensing the weight behind her words.
Who was he?
She leaned in, her voice hushed yet resonant.
The Marquis de Sade.
Daniel blinked in surprise.
The writer?
Yelena nodded, a faint smile touching her lips.
Not just any writer. He was a vampire of House Strix, a Nosferatu who took our house's ideals and twisted them into his own dark philosophy. His life and works were dedicated to indulge in every vice, every taboo. He wasn't just a libertine. He was an architect of chaos, using his writings and actions to tempt humanity into embracing their darkest impulses.
She began her tale, her words bringing to life a vision of 18th century France, where aristocratic decadence veiled society's simmering unrest. Born into privilege, the Marquis de Sade had been expected to live as a noble, embodying the virtues of his class. But his nature, heightened by his vampiric transformation, drove him to pursue something far different.
His appetites were boundless.
Yelena continued, her voice edged with a chill.
To him, the lines of morality were nothing but obstacles, and he saw it as his duty to shatter them. He was drawn to anything forbidden, revealing in vices that even the most depraved mortals shied away from.
Daniel shifted uneasily.
So he preyed on people?
More than that, he treated his life as a grand experiment, a way to explore what he called liberty. But his freedom was perverse. He pushed others to embrace their basest desires, to strip themselves of every inhibition. He wrote books filled with his philosophies, dark tales that glorified cruelty, hedonism, and absolute dominance over others. Humans, already tempted by their own darker natures, found themselves ensnared by his words.
Daniel frowned.
And no one tried to stop him?
He was arrested, several times in fact.
She said with a wry smile.
But the mortal authorities never understood who they were truly dealing with. They saw him as a lunatic, a pervert, a danger to decency. But he was so much more. He was a master manipulator, a seducer of minds and souls. Each time he was locked away, he'd find ways to continue his writings, inciting those who read him into perversion and reveling in mayhem he caused from the shadows of his cell.
Daniel's gaze fell, a wave of revulsion tightening in his chest.
So he was a corrupter, a predator. And House Strix allowed this?
Yelena's expression softened.
Don't misunderstand, Daniel. Not everyone in House Strix embraced his views. Many of us saw him as a warning of what happens when our ideals go unchecked. But there was something undeniably seductive about the way he embodied pure, unrestrained freedom. His infamy strengthened House Strix's name in ways we couldn't have imagined. His tales, his successes, each became a piece of the house's reputation, a symbol of how deeply we understand human nature's most hidden corners.
Daniel grimaced, feeling a bitter taste in his mouth.
What about the people he left in ruin? The ones who couldn't escape his influence? Does House Strix simply celebrate that?
Yelena looked at him, her eyes glinting with a complicated sadness.
Daniel, I won't lie. House Strix has always walked the edge between beauty and depravity. But there are those among us who saw him not as an example to follow, but as a warning of what we could become if we lose our humanity. De Sade's life was a testament to the dangers of excess and freedom without conscience. In a way, his madness left us with a moral compass, a reminder that the line between freedom and debauchery is thin.
Daniel absorbed her words, his mind swirling with conflicted thoughts. He recognized a strange kind of brilliance in de Sade's ability to tap into human nature's darker corners, yet he felt an overwhelming distaste for the depths to which he had sunk, a perversion of freedom and art.
So that's what our house is built on? Monsters like him? Vampires who revel in cruelty and destruction?
His voice trembled slightly, betraying the despair he felt.
Is that all we are, Yelena? Is there nothing good left in us?
Yelena's gaze softened, a flicker of compassion crossing her features. She shook her head slowly.
No, Daniel, that's not all we are. Not all of us walk the same path. There are stories of vampires who defied the darkness within, who fought to hold on to their humanity despite everything.
Daniel's brow furrowed, his skepticism clear.
Like who? It seems like all the great names in our history are just more examples of how far we can fall.
Yelena leaned forward, her voice lowering, almost reverent.
Have you heard of Varney?
Varney? No, I don't think so.
Daniel echoed, unfamiliar with the name. Yelena nodded, her eyes distant as she began to weave her tale.
He was different. A vampire from centuries ago. A figure whose story became legend among mortals. They wrote about him in penny dreadfuls, of all things. To mortals, he was a villain in a melodrama. But to us, he was something more. A vampire who suffered.
She paused, letting the words hang in the air before continuing.
Varney wasn't like De Sade, who reveled in his monstrosity. He hated what he was. He loathed the bloodlust, the pain he brought to others. Every life he took weighed on him, haunted him. He lived with the constant torment of his own existence, knowing he was a monster, but desperately trying to hold on to something good, something human.
Daniel frowned, his expression softening as the story resonated with him.
What happened to him?
Varney was a tragic figure.
Yelena said quietly.
He was caught between his nature and his conscience. He tried to help those he cared about, even as he feared he would destroy them. He sought redemption, though he never believed he deserved it. He showed us that even in the depths of darkness, there is a spark of light. that we can choose to fight, even if the fight is against ourselves. You remind me of him, Daniel.
He looked up, startled.
Me?
You hate what you are, what you've become, but you haven't given in. You're still trying to do what's right, even when it feels impossible. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you strong.
Yelena reached across the table, her hand gently resting on his.
You're right to be wary. House Strix is complex, brilliant, and dangerous in equal measure. But remember, it's also a house of passion, of freedom, and of resistance. And people like me, we fight for something more than just pleasure and power. I fight to give people a voice, to resist oppression, to remind us that we are worth something.
Daniel settled deeper into his seat, his mind reeling from the stories Yelena had shared. But as Yelena prepared to tell him about Justine de la Chapelle, there was a shift in her tone. Her face gave way to a grim expression, as though this story carried a personal weight she couldn't conceal.
Now we come to someone much closer to home, Justine de la Chapelle, the first of our bloodline here in Dreadfort. She was the progenitor of House Strix in this city, and she made it her mission to see our house rise above the others.
Daniel noticed the tension in her posture, the way her hands curled into fists as she spoke.
You knew her well, didn't you?
Yelena nodded.
All too well. She was my sire, and Dupont's too. Justine wasn't just any vampire. She was a woman of terrifying power, and her ambition made her dangerous. When she arrived with the first vampires of the king's court, she claimed a position of influence immediately, taking on the title of Duchess of House Strix at the king's council.
Yelena's voice hardened, and her eyes took on a faraway look as she continued.
For Justine, power wasn't a means to an end. It was the end itself. She believed in House Strix's right to rule, not just over mortals, but over Nosferatu as well. She used blood fealty as her weapon, binding every vampire in her house to her will. Those who resisted didn't survive.
Yelena took a steadying breath.
How did she bring you into her world?
I was married when she found me. She murdered my family, left me with nothing. And then I was put under blood fealty from the moment she had brought me into the blood, forced to carry out her will. My life, my thoughts, my very desires were twisted to serve her ambition. Justine used her power over me to ensure my loyalty. I despised her, but I couldn't break free.
Daniel felt a wave of empathy and revulsion. The thought of being trapped under another's control, of having no will of his own, hit close to home.
That sounds like a living nightmare.
It was.
Yelena replied, her voice laced with bitterness.
Justine wanted nothing less than absolute rule over Dreadfort. She expanded our house's numbers and used fealty to cement her control, drawing in more vampires and binding them all under her command. It seemed like no one could stop her.
What happened to her?
Daniel asked, an uneasy hope stirring within him.
Justine's own hunger for power led to her downfall. She was destroyed during the Great Betrayal, and with her death, her hold over House Strix was broken. I was free. For the first time, I was able to choose my own path.
Yelena said, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes.
So that was the end of her influence?
Not entirely. Justine may have fallen, but her legacy lives on through Dupont. He was her most devoted child, and has worked tirelessly to rebuild the power his mother held over House Strix. Dupont is skilled, subtle, and just as dangerous. He has managed to bind a significant number of our house's Nosferatu under his own blood fealty.
Daniel felt a knot forming in his stomach.
And what about you? How did you escape his control?
Yelena's eyes narrowed with determination.
I've opposed Dupont since the day Justin fell. I've seen enough what blood-fealty can do. I know what it's like to have no will of my own, and I would die before I let someone like him bind me again.
Daniel's gaze softened.
So you resist him. But there must be others who feel the same way.
Yelena nodded.
They are. Not everyone in House Strix has fallen under Dupont's influence. Some follow me, others follow another leadership figure who has emerged in recent years. Bloody Mary. She doesn't share Dupont's obsession with control. Her methods are more independent, though not without their own kind of danger.
Daniel raised an eyebrow.
So that's how House Strix got divided?
Very much so. It's a tense balance. And with Dupont's ambitions, it feels like a storm is always just on the horizon. We live in an uneasy truce.
Doesn't it exhaust you?
Daniel asked softly.
Fighting like this, resisting control at every turn?
Yelena offered a weary smile.
It does. But that's the choice I made when I broke free from Justin. I could have allowed Dupont to bind me, to take the easy path and follow his will. But I won't go back to that life. House Strix may be steeped in the legacy of power and manipulation, but I believe it can be something more. I believe we can honor freedom, not just control.
Daniel felt a flicker of hope in her words.
It's strange, but hearing you talk about House Strix, it doesn't sound as monstrous as I expected. I always thought vampires were all about power and cruelty, but you're different.
Yelena's smile softened.
You have a good heart, Daniel. Perhaps one day, House Strix will be remembered for something more than its darker legends. Perhaps we can build something new.
Daniel looked at her.
Maybe we can. Maybe that's why I'm here.
In that quiet moment, Daniel realized that though he was still unsure about his place in this shadowed world, he wasn't alone. Together, they represented a glimmer of hope, a chance to redefine House Strix not as a place of control, but as a place where freedom might still thrive amidst the dark. Daniel sat in the dim light of the office, feeling the weight of Yelena's words settle over him like a heavy cloak. She had opened a door to a history steeped in blood and control, showing him what House Strix had been, and what it might still be if he let himself fall under Dupont's influence. Despite his misgivings about his new life, her words stirred something within him, a flicker of defiance he hadn't realized he possessed. He glanced over at Yelena, who was watching him with a fierce intensity.
It's hard to even know who to trust. I came into this world barely understanding it, barely understanding myself. Dupont saw that. He tricked me.
Yelena's gaze softened, but her voice held steady.
The path you're on doesn't have to end in servitude, Daniel. Yes, Dupont has power, but he doesn't own your soul, nor your conscience. You have the strength to resist, to reclaim your freedom from his fealty.
Daniel clenched his jaw, a spark of determination igniting within him.
How? How do I go against someone like Dupont when he's got half of House Strix under his thumb? If I try to walk away, he'll see it as betrayal. And I don't know if I can protect the ones I care about.
Yelena's eyes burned with conviction.
You'll protect them by fighting for what's right. By proving to them and to yourself that you won't be controlled. There are others who feel as you do, who've managed to resist Dupont. You have allies, Daniel. And if you want their loyalty, you have to be honest with them. No more hiding, no more running from the truth.
Her words hit him like a cold, hard truth. Daniel had spent so long struggling to accept his own nature. The thought of reaching out felt impossible, like stepping into a storm without knowing if he'd make it to the other side.
Did you know, Daniel? When the buffalo hears the storm coming, he runs towards it.
I did not. Why does he do that?
Because he gets through quicker this way, minimizes his exposure to the danger. If you run from it, it will only expose you more. Run toward the storm, Daniel. Confront it.
Her eyes glinted sharp. Yelena's confidence gave him strength, and he let out a breath, his voice steadier than he felt.
Then I'll start with the Midnight Fiends. They're my only real connection to this new life. If I can be honest with them, maybe they'll give me a chance.
Yelena nodded approvingly.
They were your last ones. Don't underestimate the bonds you've built with them. If you show them who you truly are, if you are honest about what's at stake, about the power DuPonts hold over you, they may stand by you. And together, you will be stronger.
Daniel hesitated. He thought of his friends. He thought of the fear in their eyes, the way they had recoiled from him. It had been that moment when he saw the horror in their faces that had driven him into DuPont's arms, but he couldn't keep running from the storm. It was only exposing him to more danger. He had to confront it.
Thank you, Yelena. I don't know what will come of this, but I know one thing. I can't let fear and doubt control me anymore.
Then fight for it, Daniel. Fight for the part of you that this curse should never touch. Remember, you're not alone. And let's retake our house from that monster.
He would reach out to the Midnight Fiends, to those he once called friends, and tell them the truth. He would fight to win back their trust and, in doing so, find a way to break free from DuPont's influence. And if that meant standing against House Strix, he would do it, because he knew now more than ever that he had something worth fighting for. Yelena's gaze still lingered on Daniel as she wrapped up her words of encouragement. The tales she'd shared had awakened something within him, a sense of purpose, perhaps even a hint of hope. The stories of House Strix's infamous figures and her own bitter resistance to their legacy hung in the air like a whispered challenge. She glanced around the cluttered space and smirked, her eyes settling on the stockpile of rat blood Daniel kept tucked away in a dusty corner. With a wry, almost motherly sigh, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small glass bottle filled with a thick, dark liquid. She set it on his desk with a slight flourish.
Wild boar, it tastes better. Trust me.
She said, a teasing smile flickering at the corner of her mouth. Her voice softened.
You might as well live a little, Daniel. Even if our lives are unconventional.
Daniel stared at the bottle, momentarily taken aback. He was used to the bare minimum, to the stale, metallic taste of his usual supply.
Thank you,
he murmured, his fingers brushing the cool glass. Yelena nodded, a subtle understanding passing between them, and with that, she turned and slipped out the door, leaving Daniel alone with the thoughts she'd stirred within him. He sat in silence, fingers running over the label on the bottle. Her words echoed in his mind, urging him to confront his past, to fight for his own autonomy, to find the courage to seek out his old allies. He was lost in thought, gathering his resolve, when a sharp knock shattered the quiet. Daniel rose and crossed the room, pulling open the door. But instead of Yelena, he found himself face to face with Leon.
Well, well,
he sneered, looking Daniel up and down with thinly veiled disdain.
Detective Reed, solving any great mysteries in here or just brooding in the dark?
Daniel reached for his stake under his leather jacket, but Leon deterred him fast. With a steady voice, Daniel demanded through gritted teeth.
What do you want, Leon?
Leon's smirk faded, replaced by a look of unease. His tone took on an edge of urgency. He met Daniel's gaze, the hostility in his eyes replaced by something almost vulnerable.
Easy, cowboy. I need your help. And so do the Midnight Fiends.